Okay. We're gonna give it probably until 10:03, 10:04 to kick this off, but um, thanks everyone for joining right now. Just had a couple of quick Q&A questions. We wanted to make this as constructive as possible. I'm curious, where is everyone joining from today? We're gonna try leaving the chat open, so at any time you're welcome to drop any comments or questions. But I'm actually in Switzerland right now. Um, it's 7 p.m. Ryan is in Bozeman, Montana. Sharath is from Germany. That's very cool. Not too far away from Switzerland. We've got Josh in San Francisco. Nice. Um, Jorge, I think I'm saying that correctly, is in Argentina and currently in California, and we have Mike in Brooklyn. Very cool. Hey, Jason. Good to see you, man. Um, Second question I had was, has anyone actually visited a factory or supplier site before? Obviously, relevant. Josh says yes, he's been to a factory.
I'm curious also what everybody is building. So what type of product or what industry?
We have someone working on battery tech. Josh is working on battery tech. For some context, I used to come from a consumer electronics background, so I spent a lot of time actually in Wisconsin at an injection molding facility. Learned a lot about presses. This is a pretty cool one. Jorge says he works on automated farm modules to go on top of grocery stores to cut out logistics.
In a past life, I started a gourmet snack company, and the company was called Fucking Nuts. And so we made gourmet snacks, and the cutouts in grocery stores are were very familiar to us. So always trying to get an end cap and always trying to get the best placement.
A couple more responses. Tim is from Portland, Oregon, and he works on stainless steel fabrication of cans and cones for deployable renewable energy devices in the ocean. And um, Evgeny has worked in aviation, nuclear, and consumer electronic facilities. Yeah, well, I think now is a good time to kick things off. More people will trickle in, but I'm going to start with some quick introductions. I'm Benji. I'll be helping moderate today's session. I'm one of the co-founders of Hardware FYI, and we like to talk about really technical and behind the scene topics like this. So specifically, Ryan's going to be going over factory site selection, which is actually a very nuanced process. I've learned a lot about that over the last month. I'll leave it to him to set the scope and what we'll be talking about today.
Great. Thanks, Benji. Thanks for having me. So my name is Ryan Abramson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scout Cities. I've been building and investing in venture-backed tech and manufacturing the last 15 years. And as part of that journey, I went through the site selection process as an investor and an advisor, and it helped us realize how fragmented site selection and economic development are in the US. And so we started Scout to level the playing field in industrial site selection. When we were starting the company, reindustrialization was becoming this national mandate, but there was no technology supporting the cause in site selection. And we built this platform that helps hard tech companies secure sites, energy, and incentives. And the same way that we've been outsourcing manufacturing out of the US for the last 50 years, we were outsourcing the site selection of these really critical projects to brokers and consultants and not to technologists. So we're really excited to be bringing technology to this critical element of rebuilding here in the US, and that's site selection. We're currently working on more than $6 billion worth of projects. These are going to create 4,000 jobs. They will generate great opportunities in all the regions they select. So we're really excited to be joining this reindustrialized mission. And we're working on projects that range from nuclear fusion facilities to carbon neutral EV tire factories, green fertilizer plants, semiconductors, you name it. Hard tech and deep tech is really where we focus. And we're focused on companies that are venture backed and are either doing this for the first time, second time, or they're doing this ongoing and they want to make site selection a core competency of their company, because if they're going to scale to the size that of their dreams, then they need the siting process to be really dialed in. Today, we're going to talk about when to start, what type of criteria to look for when you kick off a site selection process, incentives and non-dilutive capital. I know everybody's really excited about that part. Energy access, this is the biggest bottleneck for when we're talking in megawatts and we're talking in dozens or hundreds of megawatts. This is one of the biggest challenges in site selection. And I'm seeing that, especially when I talk to founders who are doing this for the first or second time, energy access and availability is something that they drastically underestimate. And then lastly, we'll hit on the Amazon HQ2 playbook. They really popularized a competitive site selection process in the US when they were going out for their HQ2. So we'll dig into their playbook a little bit. And then just as a overview for this workshop, we're calling it a workshop because we'd like it to be collaborative. A webinar, you could just watch a recording. It's a little bit boring. So I'm going to try and stop at a couple of different places throughout this where we'll workshop. Hopefully somebody here is either going to start site selection soon or going through the process now, and you want to workshop one element of your process. And so we'll bring you up as a presenter and feel free to ask questions, or we could just dig in together. Zooming out a little bit, reindustrialization is here. What does that mean? Well, startups and incumbents alike are starting to build a lot more in the US. It's, like I said before, a national mandate. It's trickling down to the state and local levels, but there's a big problem at play, and that's that everybody, whether you are a startup or you are a large player, you're fighting for the same resources when it comes to siting. And those resources are the property itself, the power, the incentives and non-dilutive capital, and the labor. We have a shortage of a lot of these things when it comes to rebuilding manufacturing in the US. And so what we've found in our experience, the average site selection process is taking about 9 months. That's just for a run-of-the-mill site selection process. If you have a huge power requirement, or you need 100 people or 500 people or 1,000, this is going to add a lot of time. I will caveat this with, if you're just looking for 5,000 square feet of flex space near the Pentagon, you could probably do this in 3 to 4 months, depending on what inventory looks like. But if you need a lot of power, you need a lot of labor, you need a unicorn site, this is going to take you more time than you think. If you're spending $100 million, add 3 months. If you need dozens of megawatts, add 6 months. And if you are going to be spending $1 billion or need 50 megawatts or more, add a year to your process. And that's just to find the site. That's not necessarily to get the power. If you're looking at a investor-owned utility or a regulated market, the flexibility is not quite as strong as if you're working with a municipality or a co-op who might be able to structure something unique to your project. From a timeline standpoint, we've been tracking every requirement, every step and activity that a company would have to go through in order to effectively site their new factory. We're not going to go through these all today, obviously, but we've put together a timeline estimator. We're building site selection technology and creating a lot of resources for companies that want to learn more about the process or want to have tools at their disposal if they plan to do it alone or they plan to bring somebody in. We've got a lot of tools that, again, are free for you to use as you start the process. So if you share some of the high level criteria confidentially of your project, we'll give you an estimate of how long we think it can take. Bottom line here, if you're doing a big deal, it doesn't happen overnight. And I always say there's no harm in starting now, which I think is different than a lot of, especially earlier stage founders come in with, because they feel like until they have everything perfectly in order, they don't want to start and then stop and then pivot. And that's very common, especially for a fast moving company. And unless you start, you won't know the intricacies of the process or the unique elements of each location that might change your process. So just getting started in some format, maybe putting together all the criteria you think you're going to need is a good place to start. I've got a Gantt timeline, a Gantt chart here that I could give to you. And if your project is run of the mill, this is something that might be helpful to you as you get started. If it's a really complex project, take this as your baseline and start adding to it. Just shoot me an email, ryan@scoutcities.com, and I'll send all of these documents over to you. All right, jumping into what to look for. This will be our last section, then we'll jump into last section of this part, and then we'll jump into a workshop. So these are really the core 4 categories of site selection criteria. Sites, it's the property that you need. Utilities, you're looking really here for something that may be a bottleneck. If you just need general industrial power and you just need water and wastewater to support your bathrooms and general activity, then not going to be a huge issue. But if you need a ton of power, a ton of gas, a ton of water, those are the types of things that you want to get ahead of early. Capital, we'll talk about capital stack and non-dilutive opportunities. And then labor, this is a big challenge. Again, you're competing with some of the largest companies in the world who need these same technicians and welders and operations and productions associates. So really understanding your labor requirements is going to be a key priority. I'm going to jump into the minimum and maximum effort you want to have on each of these criteria as you get started in the site selection process. The site itself, the minimum effort is what type of property do you need? Do you need greenfield or brownfield? I'm finding that a lot of companies are saying both, and that's great, but it will confuse a community. It may confuse the real estate community on what type of property is perfect for you. So you don't need all the criteria lined up when you start, but just try and figure out what your preference would be if it's a greenfield or brownfield site. How many acres? How big is the building? Those types of things at a minimum are going to be helpful so that you can see what's on the market. And then you can go for off-market sites once you really understand 150 criteria about your site. So this would be really the max effort. We've got a template on this too. As you start that site selection process, the reason I say get going early is because you will start to fill this out along the way and be able to find that perfect site or perfect building once you're really clear on what the requirements are. From a utility standpoint, minimum effort, look for bottlenecks. How much power do you need? How many megawatts? Again, if it's just general industrial power and we're not talking in megawatts, then you're going to be probably okay to get started. But if you have a major utility requirement, one-line diagrams, ramp timing, load schedules, those types of resources and analysis of your power can be really useful. Capital, just know what your capital stack is. This is really important from an incentive standpoint because a state and local authority who might be providing an incentive to you, they want to know that your facility can be financed without their incentive or their grant. And so if you say that grants and incentives are part of your capital stack going in, that's not a great sign to them. So if you can come in, you don't have to be you don't have to go max effort in the beginning, which I'll get to in a moment, but if you can at least say what percent is going to be debt versus equity versus off takes to de-risk the project, those are going to be really, really helpful. From a max effort standpoint, a total cost of ownership model or a 20-year NPV, really understanding what the CapEx and OpEx is over the course of that factory. Is something that, again, can build you a lot of leverage when you're going to look for the property and you're going to get incentives. And then labor at a minimum, how many people are you going to hire over 10 years? This is especially challenging for startups. Back to the incentives piece, we're talking a 10-year horizon, and most companies are looking out 1, 2, 3 years at the most, but 10 years is the lifetime, or 20 years lifetime of these projects. So figuring out just how many people are going to hire, if you can get their job codes and what the average wage is going to be, that could be really helpful as well. At a max effort, full labor analysis, what's available in each market, how are you going to bridge the gap where there might be a shortage in that market, what is the cost, how will you maintain competitiveness in that market if you have incumbents or even industry players that you're competing with in that market. More templates, a staffing model, an overview, a site criteria library. These are things that might help you in your process. Even if you've already gotten started, I think a lot of these will be really useful to you. I'm going to pause there. Would love to get into a workshop. If anybody wants to come up and talk about their project, ideally you're building something physical and you're looking for a site, or you're looking for sites, energy, or incentives. Any of those three, I think, would make for a fruitful conversation.
Yeah. Also, the Q&A tab should be open, so if you have questions, you can drop those there. But if not, the chat feature just sends all your messages to us so we can query as well.
So we're getting some questions, but does anybody have an active project or an upcoming project that they want to talk through? I think that would be the best format here. I can't answer these questions before the end of the workshop, but yeah, if anybody wants to be bold enough to come up and talk about it, effectively come up, tell us what you're working on and what some of your key questions are. And if not, then we will just hit these questions at the end. Josh says he'll go. Amazing.
Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna find Josh and then I'm gonna promote him to a panelist. We're allowed to chat.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear
sir.
you.
All right. Good to meet you both. Okay, so Battery Tech, we're in a small facility right now in San Francisco. We'll be, we're building out our micro factory here. So we're looking, maybe in the next 18 to 24, maybe 30 months to select the site and build out a production facility for large commercial batteries. So I think a couple things I'd like to, from my standpoint, since, nobody else is stepping up, so I'm like, okay, I'll go. Two things. We've got two different manufacturing pieces. One is a production line. One is it's essentially some vertical integration to make a particular part. So that vertical integration piece would need one footprint, and then the production line would need a second footprint. The issue we're facing is they may not be on the same time scale, meaning we would probably do the vertical integration piece first and then follow on with the production line maybe 12 months later, maybe 18 months later, depending on, all kinds of things like capital raising. So, so thoughts as to staging, and would there be, from your experience, are there sites that would that could be expandable, right? Or ways to think strategically about expanding in the same footprint or a footprint close by. That's number one. And then number two is we're in San Francisco now. I think we'd like to be in the western part of the US. So we're looking at Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, maybe even California, if California can kind of get off its ass and really do something good.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about incentives and, different ways to approach states and municipalities. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that's enough for you to workshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it. Sounds like the big question is just how do we get started maybe with the production line and then add on later and ensure that you're not needing to site select twice if you just want to
Correct.
do an expansion.
That's
How,
right.
how much power will you need?
Um, it's just call it a normal production line. Like you were saying, it's not like super power intense.
Okay. Yeah, my recommendation would be to understand the footprint of the expansion. So your total footprint. There's a couple options there. There's existing buildings available that have planned expansions that may support if you are ready to take on that additional real estate, you can put yourself in position to negotiate that up front. You can also work with a developer if you're planning to do greenfield to ensure that, okay, we're gonna start with this existing footprint, but we want the site to be expandable. My recommendation on phased approach too, if there's not a huge power requirement, you want an existing building, there's nothing crazy about the physical property itself. Finding a multi-tenant opportunity where the landlord can be flexible with you and almost give you first right of refusal to that additional space. So maybe the building itself is 500,000 square feet. You're going to take 100,000, another 200,000 is not accounted for yet, but in your lease, in your contract, you can negotiate that before they bring in another tenant, you have the right to additional space. So you don't necessarily have to put up the cash for it or include it in your lease now, but it's available. Now, that does put you in a position to where if you're not ready to move at that point, you would want to, that may be a risk to you, but I think that would be the best way of not having to put the capital up front, but still having that opportunity.
All right, good ideas.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Do you have any other questions on? I mean, I think you asked about western part of the U.S. and other than wanting to be, is the western part of the U.S. a supply chain consideration to be close to the EV market, or what is the western drive?
It's more because our headquarters will remain in San Francisco. We've all got experience of being with a West Coast company with a Southeast factory. And there were significant drawbacks to that. So we don't want, we're not going to look in the Carolinas or Georgia or Tennessee. It's proximity to headquarters.
Okay. My other suggestion then is to some of the states that you mentioned, start engaging at the state and local level sooner than later. Just let them know what you're working on. Hey, I'm not ready to go transact on a building yet, but here's what our project looks like. Here's the product we're making, the number of people that we're going to hire, how much I think this project can produce over the next 5-10 years, and just get the conversation going with the economic development organizations. They're such a great resource, and they really are there to help with the property and the incentives and any of the labor requirements that you might have. So if you get a head start, it's going to reveal things in your process that you probably haven't thought of so far.
Yeah, I'm curious, have you heard anything specific about New Mexico?
I've heard a lot about New Mexico. New Mexico is really making a big play right now in many different industries, and they've got a sovereign wealth fund they're creating. They are getting very aggressive. I think labor is going to be the big unknown, and can for really large projects, can the skilled labor and volume of labor meet the requirements of these projects? So depending on what that workforce looks like for you, yeah, that would be a consideration.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Let's continue. And we'll save time at the end. I'll try to hit on a lot of these questions. Benji, if you could corral them, and maybe we can organize them by category, and make sure that we're answering them as we go. All right. Incentives and non-dilutive capital. So there are really three buckets, and I'm going to talk primarily on state, county, and local. We support on and we work with a lot of companies that do federal incentives, but they are sometimes less reliable, in my opinion, than the state and local side. A new regime change or new policy changes can affect those large programs, and we've seen this with CHIPS and IRA and many of these federal programs that are putting companies in a tough spot. And so at the state and local side, that's where we focus, and then we'll support on federal programs. But at the state and local level, you have statutory incentives. These are written into law. If you're eligible and you apply, you will get them. A lot of times they're tax oriented. Discretionary incentives are programmatic, so they exist, but they are negotiable. And you do need to go get approval. You need to build leverage in order to secure them. And they can be negotiated typically up to a cap. When we're talking uncapped incentives, that's where we go into this net new category. This requires net new legislation. If your project is big enough, or there's a large enough economic output of the project that requires state and local stakeholders to come up with new policy. Maybe there's a site that's great, but it's going to cost $50 million to build new roads. If you can justify that the new jobs you create and the economic impact that you have is worth the state and local government paying for that infrastructure, then that would be a net new type incentive program. I'm going to talk briefly about Anduril. This is a project that maybe a lot of you have seen, their Arsenal 1 project in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm just going to dig in a bit on a few of the highlights. So it's $1 billion CapEx. It's going to create 4,000 new jobs and 5 million square feet of total space. So it's a pretty massive project, especially when it comes to jobs. When you're talking in 100 to 500 jobs, that's a really big project. 500 to 5,000 jobs is really more so a mega project. And you will be one of the largest projects in any state that you go into in the last 10 years is going to be a project of that size. So Anduril hit on all three types of incentives. They had a net new infrastructure grant for 70 million. They had tons of discretionary incentives and then some statutory incentives as well. Total incentive package was almost 80% of their CapEx. So this is an outlier by every standard. Most of the projects that we see, we've been tracking this incentive database across the US over the last, we've been doing it for 3 years, but it goes back 30 years and it's got about 500,000 records in it. The average incentive deal as a percentage of CapEx, so how much you get back in relation to your CapEx, is between 5 and 25%. Anduril getting 80% is obviously a huge outlier there. And then we also track dollar per job. So the range on dollar per new job that you create is between $5,000 and $25,000. There's plenty of projects where it's $50,000 to $100,000 a job. It just requires a net new legislation to put incentives forth that did not previously exist. Bottom line here is that mega deals don't happen overnight. If you're doing a project of this size, it's going to take you years, especially because you need to work with champions and state and local policymakers to come up with new programs, and those new programs have to be approved by city councils and boards, and you're going to have to go to those meetings. So it's a major effort. If you're a small or mid-sized project, the effort is not quite like that, but you still may, if you're trying to get an outsized outcome, you may want to start early and go for those net new incentives. In terms of an incentive strategy, this is a very simplified version of what I think works very well and what we employ here at Scout. The first thing is an eager champion. You need somebody at the state and local level who really sees the project as generational or a major opportunity, and it needs to align with their priorities in order for them to be your incentive champion. From an economic impact standpoint, there's something called an economic impact analysis. You can find PDFs from past projects, and this really shows the tax revenue that the state, the city, and county are going to make from the project, the indirect and induced jobs. Everybody uses this net new job number or full-time employee number that they're going to hire, but think a few layers beyond that. If you're in a critical industry and your project is going to attract suppliers and other companies that want to do business with you to that area, you may create 4, 5, 6 additional jobs than the ones that you're creating. Next would be state and local priority alignment. So if this is a photonics hub and you are working it in the industry or adjacent, being able to tell that story of why this is not just another project that creates jobs and has a lot of CapEx. It's a project that is going to advance their vision for the state and the community. If you go to any economic development website or any city website, a lot of times they'll have their target industries, they'll have their own 5 to 10 year plan of what they want to see happening from a business standpoint in that community. If you can align your project to that, and every time you get on the phone with them, relaying it back based on their priorities, you'll get a lot more out of the process. And then lastly, leverage equals momentum over time. This is for any company that's moving really quickly. You might raise money, you might get a new offtake agreement, you might release a new product. Start stockpiling all these unique moments throughout your company that you can drip throughout the incentive negotiation process to say, look, things are really moving here and this is getting more exciting, and this is why we need to move quickly on our incentive opportunity, because our company is moving fast and we're continuing to hit our milestones. Last piece here, know your numbers. So the nice thing about incentives is that they're publicly available. So you can find not only the programs, but the history. And so my recommendation is to figure out, if you're looking in the state of Colorado, you should know the biggest deal that was done in the state of Colorado and how that was structured and why your project should get the same or better, and be able to build a story around that data. We offer a lot of this data. So again, you could sign up for Scout and see 500,000 incentive records. I had a pause here to do maybe another workshop around incentives. If anybody wants to volunteer quickly and jump up and ask a few questions around the incentives process.
This also might be a good break point. Tony had a really good question. He said, specifically, what jurisdictions are good for incentives these days?
It's a good question. I would say, well, I have to say this because I've done enough of these projects now where it has to be said that incentives should make a good deal great and not a bad deal good. And so don't locate your company based on incentives. It's not going to work out for you. But if you can find the location that has great workforce and great utilities and a good ecosystem for your industry, and then the incentives piece, then that'll work for you. And what jurisdictions are good? They're all different. We've got let me see if I can just pop up a quick view of this. Perfect. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you're creating a lot of net new jobs, you should probably try to find the jurisdiction that has the highest per job incentive. Or if you are going to be doing a huge greenfield project that requires $100 million in infrastructure improvements, you should find a state or locale that's willing to partner with you on infrastructure upgrades. We actually just rolled out this new feature here called state scoring, where you can take a look how each state ranks when it comes to these key criteria, incentives, their quality of life, their labor force. So just looking at overall incentives this way could be a useful tool for you. Hopefully that was helpful. I guess the last thing I'll say on this, because I didn't give you an actual state or a jurisdiction. If you're a startup, the incentives process at the state level can be lengthy, and they want a lot of times 3 years of audited financials. And so finding locales, finding cities and counties that have their own incentive programs could be really helpful. In the state of Texas, that's a really good example. At the state level, their incentives aren't really geared towards startups. They're geared toward more enterprise companies. But at the local level, if you're creating new jobs, you can probably have a new incentive offer from a local economic development organization within 2 to 3 months. They have what's called type A EDCs in Texas. And at the local level, if there's a type A EDC, it means they have a sales tax in the community that the revenue from it can be used for business attraction. And so it's a great way to get involved in the incentives process, learn about it, and have maybe a little bit more speed than you would if you're going at the state level. And then state of North Carolina is the opposite, where it's really at the state level that you would be able to engage. And that's where most of the job creation incentives would come from.
If there is anyone that still wants to workshop, feel free to message us. But I think there's one more question that we can answer in between from Lizzie that I think is actually quite cool. It's specifically on the template slash tool sides that you were showing earlier. Do you have anything available for earlier stage companies, for example, that are looking to lease a 25 to 100K square foot facility?
Yes, the templates will all be applicable. And then we also have a commercial property database in the platform. So this is nationwide, and you can filter it by square feet. And so 25 to 100,000 square feet, and then pulling up, properties that might meet the requirements of your project. And you can start. The nice thing about this, you can start doing your own filtering and generate a short list. So if you find a property you like, you can add it to a project. And if you're starting early and just want to see what's on the market, you can use this property database. This is the way we get this data. We're scraping broker websites. So any broker that lists a property in commercial and industrial, it would be here. And then we also have sites that are off market, that are either municipally owned or from economic development organizations and utilities. And that's where this data would come from. We work with a partner on the real estate data. They're called Resimplify, and they're amazing. And so we like this data a lot, and it's a great way to get started. The other thing here, Lizzie, you can start a project and you can share all the criteria that you're looking for in that 25,000 square foot building. And then what this does, it creates an RFP for you, and you can distribute that out to some of the jurisdictions that you're looking in, and you can get tailor-made sites sent directly to you. So rather than you having to filter through that big property database, you can actually distribute an RFI or an RFP through the platform. All right, I'm going to continue on because we still have the energy section, and then we also have the Amazon HQ2 section, and then we'll do the last workshop questions at the end. Power. This is, like I said, really being underestimated, especially by companies that are either doing this for the first or second time. And when you need a lot of power, you really have to get started early. The hyperscalers have sucked up every megawatt that's cheap and renewable and reliable. And so we'll have people reach out to us and say, we're looking for 20 megawatts in the Pacific Northwest. We know they have a lot of cheap hydro and a lot of great availability of that type of power. That's not true anymore. We've done enough of these projects in the Pacific Northwest to know that cheap, reliable, renewable energy is not as abundant as it once was. The hyperscalers have been there. They've put in their interconnect requests years and years in advance. And so it's a really strained area. And if you're looking in the West at all, it is especially going to be a challenge for you. We like to say that you're not competing with those in your industry per se when it comes to power. You're competing with data centers and hyperscalers and Bitcoin miners because they all want cheap, renewable, reliable energy as well. And so you might have to flex on one of those. It might not be as renewable as you hoped, or it might not be as cheap as you hoped. I couldn't help myself here with the Power Rangers analogy. Hopefully a few people get this. But if this is a huge requirement for you, getting started early, and here's what I would suggest if power is a major requirement for you: go direct to the utilities, start to work with them on what your load's going to look like, when you need it, what the ramp schedule looks like. Again, you'll learn a lot about what the process will be for you if you just have these conversations and really understand your load. Is it flexible? Can you participate in demand response programs? And where are those programs available throughout the country? One of the things that we put together is a map here of all the electric retail territories in the US. So if you're looking at a particular market, being able to identify who to reach out to there to start the power conversation would be really useful. And then site selection in general, people think going to state and local government. But when it comes to power, we've benefited a lot from going directly to the utility. So putting together an RFP or an RFI and sharing that with the utility. Utilities also have an economic development. A lot of times they'll have an economic development lens or team, and they get a lot of benefit to you creating new jobs in the region, you supporting new upgrades on the system. So finding a utility that you can partner with early would be a great benefit to your project. And then by distributing that RFP, they will send you sites. So they can help you identify. This is some utilities, an investor-owned utility who's quite constrained and has a really buttoned up process. They might look at an RFP and say, hey, that's not how we operate. You bring us a site, we tell you how much power is there. But if you find willing utilities, they will oftentimes say, hey, this could be a really exciting load for us. You could be a great customer. We'll help you find a site. And so here's some in our network that you should think about. And then just really know your numbers. So again, the energy market in the US is really changing, and understanding where now that reliable, available, cheap power is something that can benefit your team when you're thinking about each of these markets. The last piece on the power before I move on. This is a part of our product that we're continuing to build out. We're always really interested in what the bottlenecks around power are for industrial clients. And so if there's something here that you have a question on or you'd like data on, we'd love to hear from you, because this is something we're spending a lot more time on. We've got a few modules now and a few ways to leverage the platform from an energy standpoint. We just released an energy mode in our product, so you can see all the substations and transmission lines at a pretty quick glance. And so, yeah, if there's more data here or more questions that you have, we'd love to get in touch with you and see if it's part of our roadmap. All right, Amazon HQ2. I mentioned they really popularized this competitive distribution of a site selection project in the US. They ended up with 238 proposals. Some were run of the mill. Here's a property, and here's why we think we have a great resource or incentive package for you. And some cities even offered to change their name to Amazon. So it was a very interesting process to track. There's a lot of press around it. The whole thing was public, so digging into it is all publicly available. I broke down how they did this from a strategy standpoint. So it's really a funnel. All site selection is a funnel. At the top of the funnel, you need to gather data so that you can start making a great decision. Foundational data. So this would be data across properties, energy, labor, and incentives. A lot of this data is public, and it sucks to corral it all, but that's part of why we built our platform, but it's all public. So if you want to go to the BLS or you want to go to FERC or the EIA, this is information that you can pull in and start to build your own methodology around what makes a great site for you. So they combine that foundational data across those key categories and combine that with internal data, customer data, supply chain information. And what they're working on is building an analysis of each location. So building a score of how the state stacks up on those critical components. Once they established which of those states they felt like were worth distributing the project to, they built an RFP. The RFP itself is publicly available. So you can see it's a simple document. They said, this is what we're looking for. We're Amazon. Here's why it's a really exciting project. And then they took that RFP, distributed it, and built a ton of momentum and press around it. And they dripped. I said before that leverage equals momentum over time. And so they were really good at dripping that momentum every few weeks. There was a new article, new video, new update, shortlist has happened here. These are types of things that really helped get everybody excited about it. Once all that data came back in the form of bids, they created a shortlist and they analyzed it, scored it, and did another round of, hey, this is the information that we have now, and we're ready to make a shortlist based off of that. And then they negotiated the hell out of their incentives and their community engagements. Just giving this a little bit of a color here. So taking that foundational data, making a short list, building that RFP. If you go to just the Wikipedia page, I think this RFP is available, so you could see what type of document they sent out and what the instructions looked like. We've digitized this whole thing, so again, you can create an RFP through our platform, and then that distribution. If your project is going nationwide or you're going to 5 to 10 states, the process of managing it is very laborious. You are going to get a lot of questions. You're going to get tons of follow-up. You will have a lot of data as well. And so streamlining it all in one place and being able to collect it so that you can create those scores and analyze will be very useful to you. The scoring itself, obviously, this is on a per project basis. There's high level criteria that can be scored across any metro area or any state. But when it comes to your project specifically, there may be some unique criteria that you want to consider for your scoring methodology. Creating that short list and then going back for another round is the way you make this really competitive. And then dripping great information is something that, again, super public from Amazon. So if you're curious to see how these articles looked along the way, it's quite easy to find. Part of the negotiation process entails really understanding the champion. So is there a governor up for re-election that would love this as a stamp on their campaign? Is there a is there a representative that would love to support you and help bring you to the governor? And is this supporting their agendas? This can go the other way as well. Amazon, they had all but moved to New York when they, from a community standpoint and a policymaker standpoint, they got thwarted there, and the project didn't move forward. So this is the flip side of making something really public, making it very competitive. If it doesn't align to what's happening at the local level, it could be a big challenge. And so that would be the one thing to really have a good strategy around when it comes to the press and it comes to the competitive nature of the project. The decision, they ended up going to Virginia. They didn't get that large of an incentive package. It was 20% or so of the total capex. But what Virginia did, there's a really interesting article out there that talks about the work they did with an economist from Berkeley, who he wrote a book called The New Industry of Jobs. I think it's over there on the shelf somewhere. But yeah, he worked with them to build education as part of the centerpiece of their pitch. And so I think back to what I said before about don't choose a place based on incentives, choose it based on where you think you could build a generational company or opportunity. That's very apparent here in the decision with Amazon. So really understand the funnel and go build. That's it. And thank you all for spending some time with me here. We're very approachable and accessible. Email us, hit us up on LinkedIn. We'd love to support. We try to add, we of course have paid opportunities and premium software as well as services, but we try to be really helpful up front and add a lot of value because we know these projects cost a lot of money. They're huge decisions and critical for the future of your company. So we'd like to add as much value up front as we can. And if it ever makes sense to work together in the future, then that's great. And if our resources can be helpful to you otherwise, that's awesome too.
Okay, we have a couple lingering questions, and feel free to continue dropping them. Still have 8 minutes left. It looks like Josh raised his hand again. I'm going to allow you to talk, so we'll just see where the conversation goes.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Just curious. I was actually I didn't mean to do this, but I was going to put it in the chat. But so we've in previous companies we've worked with brokers, JLL in particular. Have a very good relationship with them. They seem to have like a lot of the same tools. So I'm not to pick on JLL at all, but maybe just brokers in general. And then also worked with our attorneys to help us get like incentives and whatnot. So curious as to how Scout either is the Scout service additive to those, or is it like in lieu of working with those types of providers?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So we initially set out to build Scout for site selectors and for brokers, and we've had many of them. We've had Cushman and Wakefield and even some folks from JLL into the platform, leveraging it for their site selection projects. And eventually we heard from enough of our customers and enough of the industrial community that they wanted to leverage this directly. And so we built a services team around our platform. Our big edge is in the data and the platform itself, and it is unique to Scout. So a lot of this is proprietary data that we've collected and scraped, and it's focused on hard tech startups, venture-backed companies that are moving really quickly, and they want to work with a company like ours that is moving at that same pace. And so most of our customers have some design partnership element to the project where they are using our foundational platform to add on to. We have a forward deployed engineer on every project to where if we don't have the data you need, we'll go collect it, or we will incorporate your data, customer data, supply chain data on top of the foundational platform we've built. So really operating more like a tech company than a brokerage per se. And we do partner sometimes with large brokerages if we need coverage in a certain market, but primarily at this point it is competitive.
Got it. Thank you.
The other piece, Josh, one of our earliest customers was economic development organizations. So we worked with them to market their industrial assets on a public marketplace that was Scout. And so a lot of those resources, the data we collected, the properties that they shared, all of that lives within our platform. And then those contacts and relationships all live in the platform as well. So whether you work with us directly from a full service standpoint, or you just want to use the software, you could go in there and pull economic development contact information and data across any community in the US.
Okay. We've got a really cool question from Nico. Also, good to see you again. He said, I'm interested in developing a startup that is working on a fully renewable DC data center. First part is, I'd like your general take on the business, but in particular, if you see hooking up renewables to power factories without conversion losses to be useful in other factory applications.
Can you put that question in the top of the chat?
Yeah.
And how large of a data center? How many megawatts? I'm just wondering if this is like a modular data center or this is something much larger.
100 megawatts is what he just said.
Yeah, and running off renewable power. Because getting 100 megawatts of renewable power right now, I see as your biggest challenge, frankly. You know, a lot of communities will see data centers as a big challenge. There's a lot of areas in the US, especially where renewable power is more abundant, are moving away from data centers because they take all the energy, increase the cost for other ratepayers, and don't create a lot of jobs. And so just on the surface, and I may not be reading this correctly, but on the surface, I think that would be your biggest challenge of finding that power and finding a willing partner who wants to work with you on that. Not impossible, but also, you know, could be 4 to 5 years before you get that.
Okay. Last two
Just an
questions.
example, like Chelan County in Washington, they just don't have that type of power available anymore, and especially for data centers, they would just say no. You know, they're bringing new generation online, but they're just not they're not gonna reserve it for data centers. And so I think maybe a behind the meter project that would be a good angle to pursue. You know, finding a solar development that you can partner with would be interesting. We have a customer that is doing net zero power generation, and they want to partner with a data center. So it is natural gas power plant, but they will do point source direct air capture. 100 megawatts of generation or more. So would be interesting to hear from you if you want to shoot me a note. Cool.
Okay,
I think
we're you.
I wish I saved time. I have time to hang on for a few more questions. And obviously this is being recorded, and like I said, I'm accessible, and just reach out to me directly if you ever want to chat. Were there any more big questions, Benji, that we missed?
No more big questions, but there was one very specific one from Darren. He just wanted to know what you thought about constraints like proximity to hydrogen pipelines.
What do I think about constraints around that? I'm not sure I fully understand the question of like how to site near a hydrogen pipeline.
I think that'd be the way to answer it.
Yeah, I would get a shapefile of the hydrogen pipelines. Oh, he said, really whether you account for proximity. Yeah, we have we don't have hydrogen pipelines in our platform, but we do have nat gas pipelines and rail lines, and we have we have CO2 pipelines, we have transmission lines. There's a bunch of data already loaded up into the map, and so if you wanted to get hydrogen added, it's something that we could talk about. That's part of the forward deployed engineer model. If we don't have data that our customers need, we'll get it added to their project. And so my recommendation would be, getting a full visual of where those pipelines are, and then comparing that with the other data that's important on your project. So how big of a building, how much workforce, what type of energy do you need? And then trying to put all those factors into one to figure out where should we actually go look in each of these markets. And then you can see, once you have a property on the map, you can see how close it is to those pipelines. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for having me. And really appreciate the attendance and the questions. My email, let me see if I can get back to this here. My email is ryan@scoutcities.com, and very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me there, that works as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.